Hey everyone, if you look at the weekly schedule here, you'll notice a few things. So one, I'm going to have most of your feedback on your assignments submitted on Tuesday night or maybe Wednesday afternoon at the very latest. Either way, to complete this next assignment, the synthesis essay, you're going to want to review that feedback. So we only have one written assignment tonight. It's the synthesis essay. It's about it's a 3-page assignment. You can write more if you want, but it's basically the first pass at our final research paper. So this week we're going to do the synthesis essay. Next week we're going to do a rough draft of the final essay, and then the week after that you're going to turn in the final essay and you'll be done with the course. So we've been building toward this for a while, and I'm going to teach you how to write a synthesis essay in this assignment. But before we do that, I do want to show you when you get your feedback, you want to go into your grade book. I'm in student mode right now. And in your gradebook, you're going to see the feedback that I've given you on all of your assignments. You can't see it here because obviously I haven't done any of the assignments since I'm the teacher and not a student. But over here on the right side, you'll see the feedback. As you're working on the synthesis essay, I want you to keep that feedback in mind. So let's look at the synthesis essay, what we're going to do. So if you go into your assignments folder, you'll be able to download this file here. And this is going to be your synthesis essay. So let's go over the main requirements, then I'll show you an example. You can see the example right there. It actually popped up. But give this 1 second to download. So in your synthesis essay, we've got 4 parts. And you can see these 4 parts here defining a problem. What causes the problem? What are the effects? What are the solutions? These are the same 4 questions that you would have answered in your organizing sources discussion board. So we've got our 4 categories. And what you're going to do, oh, yeah, sorry, it was, so for each of the sources, you're basically writing a 1-page paragraph around 250 to 300 words where you put everything together. This is our first pass at what is going to become your final essay. So in your paragraph where you're synthesizing stuff together, you're going to want to use the core argument of each source, a specific piece of textual evidence from each source, an explanation of how each source is related to the category you chose for it, and an explanation of the connection between the sources in the same category. So for these last two, you're not saying like, how does this source define the problem? You're just showing how it gives some kind of definition of the problem. For this here, you're not saying like, my sources are connected. You're showing what they have in common and how they complement one another in some way. I have the wrong due date on here. It's not April 7th. It's this Sunday, which is July 7th, I think. I think I hit 4-7 instead of 7-7 when I was typing it in. You'll see that in the calendar there. So that could be a little bit confusing. Let's go over how to go about like starting this essay. So if you go into your discussion list, you can see that we have this organizing sources. And you can see right here, these are the 4 categories I already told you. You've already done some of this work. What you did in your organizing sources, if we can find a good example, is you put all of the sources into a specific category, but you didn't necessarily put the sources together. So let's look at this example from Callie. So when we look at Callie's discussion post, we can see it's laid out a little confusingly, but you can see that she has said what each part is going to be for her thing. So she's grouped her sources together. Now that she's grouped her sources together, she needs to put them into conversation with one another in an actual paper. So if you go to our week 6, this is in content. If you go to the week 6 schedule, I've given you an example of what an actual synthesis essay looks like. So let's pull up the example and we'll talk about it real quick. So in the synthesis essay example, you can see that in each of her 2 paragraphs, you can see that she's got 2 sources here. So one is this source from Orzek, Hamilton, and Salifsi, and one is here from Buboltz. And what you do is you use those sources and put them into conversation with one another. So you have your main claim, right? So sleep deprivation is a common problem. And then the causes behind sleep deprivation vary between daytime sleepiness and insufficient sleep. So once we make our claim, we have our two sources to support it. So our first one, our source says that over 50% of students say that they've had the same sleep pattern since freshman year. And then this one, we see that 73% of students had occasional sleep problems. So if we go a little bit later in the paper, we can see the same strategy is used in each one. We have Agarwal, that's our next source, and then we have the quote here. And then in the next one, we have Mohammed, we have this quote here, and then here at the end is what you may have to work on a little bit. You want to show how they're connected like we did in the synthesis paragraph from last week. So here she says, Agarwal has connected cell phone use before bed as a contributing factor to poor sleep quality. Similarly, Mohammed has shown popular media platforms that result in sleep deprivation. So here's where the actual synthesis is happening, right? We're seeing that Agarwal is saying that if you're on your phone before bed, you're going to get worse sleep. And then Mohammed complements that by saying these are the specific platforms, WhatsApp, Snapchat, and YouTube, that are especially bad for sleep deprivation. So you can see how the sources are synthesized together, right? One source says one thing, the other one complements it in one way. So that's what you're going to do 4 paragraphs for your synthesis essay. So all your sources are already organized. Now you're synthesizing them together. So you're taking your specific textual information and you're using both of those pieces to support some kind of claim. So in synthesis, the main goal is just to get the sources together and show how they're all connected to some problem that you're going to be talking about. And remember, if we look back at the categories that we came up with in the assignment, it's going to be the same ones from the organizing sources. So defining a problem, causes of the problem, effects of the problem, and solutions to the problem. So I want to show you one other thing in the synthesis essay example. We've got the example here. It's a good example. But one thing I've noticed and I want people to work on a little bit consistently is this right here. This is called a dropped quotation. And if you look in your feedback on the work that I've given you for your annotated bibliography, you may have seen me say something like, oh, you have a drop quotation here. We need to introduce it. So if you see yourself when you're writing your synthesis essay and you've just got something like here where there is a quote on its own totally, or you just say like, according to a study, I think you can see an example of that here. Well, here's a good example. It just says specifically. Up here, you can see another study showed. We want to be a little more direct when we're introducing our quotes. So this is really important. When you have something like this and you've got a full sentence quote, you need to introduce it in some way. And the way you introduce a quote, I think we talked about in the synthesis sources video, is you want to explain in your own words what the author is saying. And the reason we do that, it guides our reader to interpret the information in the same way that we interpreted the information when we read it in the article. Your reader hasn't read the article, so you got to like do that work for them so that they understand how you're using the data. You can't just drop it in. That's why we call it a dropped quotation. So here, since the quote says the most frequently used social media platforms were WhatsApp, Snapchat, and YouTube, and the strongest predictor of having very poor sleep quality was addiction on Twitter. So you would say something like, to introduce this quote, you would say something like, Mohammed has identified specific social media that can affect sleep. And then you put a colon, and then you have the quote in. We always got to introduce the quote by saying what the quote is, what the quote does in our own words. It can seem a little bit repetitive, but that's just part of academic writing. So this is the synthesis essay and everything we need to do this week. Remember, you've already organized the sources together. You've already gotten the textual information from the annotated bibliography. What we're doing at this point is putting it all together into a draft of an essay that's at least 3 pages long. If you go longer, that's totally fine. It just means you get um, more eyes, more time on your writing, which is always a good thing. But we want to be at least around 3 pages like we have here. So I don't grade the synthesis essay particularly hard because it's kind of our first draft at the research paper. It's really designed to help you do well. So don't stress about it too much. But let's get everything turned in on time. As a reminder, if we look at the schedule, if we go to the course homepage, this is going to be due on Sunday night at midnight. And I will get you feedback on that again by Wednesday so that you can write the rough draft of the essay next week. If you have any questions or concerns, just let me know and I will help you however I can.